Well, it will definitely be before our next meeting, which is March 10th. So January 20th is our first. It's our launch, and I will definitely announce that fact as
Good.
well. That's very timely information. In fact, Apple's constantly coming out with something I saw the other day that they've just registered a patent for a solar battery or hybrid device that would run. It would smartly decide whether there was power source available from the solar cell or from the wall and choose that. And where's it going?
Amazing.
Excellent. Okay. Well, you're familiar with Gar Reynolds' book Presentation Zen.
I quoted in my book. It's excellent.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
And Gar is, of course, lives in Japan, and he's presented at the Apple Store as well. And he was one of the people who also picked up on Steve Jobs' presentation style, more in terms of slide development
design
and so forth. And he's now traveling around the world. Basically, the message is ringing true to a lot of people. And and at the same time, he starts his book, if you remember in the introduction, where he's on the bullet train, the Shinkansen, and he's having a typical Japanese moment where he's got the obento box in front of him. It's just all beautifully designed and compact. There's Mount Fuji is in the background, zipping along with the high-speed technology. And at the same time, he looks to his side, and there's this poor Japanese man struggling with the PowerPoint materials that have been printed out that are packed wall to wall with tiny little text, and the guy's brow is furrowed and everything. He said, "What a contrast!" And why is it that this culture would do that when they've got this? And so he comes out with Presentation Zen as a metaphor, which I think it took a couple of years. Well, it took a Japanese translation basically to have that concept start to spread in Japan. Makes sense. I mean, how many Japanese books of changing the way of thinking of people in the United States, who can't read Japanese, So
Exactly.
It makes sense. But anyway, and I think your book is definitely doing the same. But my question is, many Japanese tend to be shy as presenters. They tend to want to feel like reading the slides is what is expected. The slides are always handed out in handouts with all the information's there. And it's more a matter of transmitting the information rather than telling a story or creating having a great sense of stage presence. So, and yet, how is it that we in the iPad Creators Club and through your book and inspiration, how can we help people who want to be more that way actually do it?
But Will, it's not just. Let me just take issue with one thing that you said.
Yeah.
It's not just in Japan.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. PowerPoint is the whole.
This is global, especially here in the U.S.
Yes.
Where people want to clutter the slides, overwhelm you and overload you with information, read from the slides. They don't pay attention to the actual story and creating a story and creating visuals and delivering it effectively. That's not just relegated to Japan.
Right, okay. Fair enough.
We have the same problem.
Yes. Excellent.
Here's my take on it. I have, as a journalist, I've interviewed and I've covered the most extraordinary, inspiring speakers in the world. And they all share something in common, whether they speak in Japan or whether they speak in the U.S. or South America. It doesn't matter. An audience is an audience.
Yes.
And they want to be inspired. And if you look at people like, doesn't Steve Jobs carry over to Japan? I mean, doesn't that style play well in Japan?
Yes, yes.
Because he is delivering information in a way that captivates the imagination. He's appealing to you both logically and analytically, the left side of the brain, but also emotionally, the right side of the brain. There are many other speakers who I think do the same thing. We have a leader here in California who runs Cisco Systems, which is a global company, and he's very popular in Japan as a global leader. Right. He gives the same presentation in Japan as he gives here, and it's very Steve Jobs-like. So what I started doing is studying people like Steve Jobs. What do they do that's universal? That whether you're a Japanese presenter or an American presenter, what can we do to make our stories come across more effectively? And there are several things that you can do today I mean, obviously, I've got a whole 200-page book on it,
Right.
but there are several things that you could do today to take your presentations to another level. Number one, do not start by opening Keynote or PowerPoint, depending on which
Right.
slide
Don't start with
present.
the slides. Yeah.
Don't start with the slides. Great designers, people who design these beautiful presentations, rarely start. They never start by opening the software.
Right.
They
Right.
sketch.
Ah.
They brainstorm. They think, how am I going to present this information visually? So number one, do not start by opening the slides. When you do open the slides, think visually. How can I bring this information to life in the visual display of information? Now, that doesn't mean that I want you to blow up your presentations entirely and never put any text on them. There's a lot of text in Steve Jobs' presentations, but it's done elegantly. It's done beautifully. Sometimes there's only one word on the slide. That takes courage, by the way, Will.
Yes.
That's courage. But oftentimes, you can do something as simple as show a visual. If you're going to show it on the slide, show it on the left side of the screen. Show a visual and make a list next to it. That's a very simple thing that you can do.
Sure.
That's called picture superiority. It's much more visually interesting than just text. Picture superiority simply means that when information is presented visually, it's easier for the brain or the audience's brain to process and retain that information.
The brain prefers the visual element, or at least goes there first, or uses that to summarize it.
But that does not mean, Will, that you only show pictures.
Right, right.
A Steve Jobs presentation, and even all the other Apple leaders, now you're going to see a lot of presentations from Tim Cook. A lot of their presentations have an image, like let's say an iPad, and a list of features right next to it.
Right.
That's something very simple that anybody can do.
Sure.
An Apple presentation is not that complicated.
Yeah.
In fact, it's quite simple. So do not start with the slides.
Can I, before you move to the next one, I'd like to just ask you, when you sketch, or let me put it this way, would you say that it would be a good idea for people to work with pen and paper and to write, say, a journal, or to make pictures and sketches, not necessarily artistically, but to make that a daily habit? Would you say that would be a good idea for presenters?
Well, or you can whiteboard as well. So sketching, pen and paper, whiteboard. Whenever I work with executives and I prepare them for a presentation, or in many cases I prepare them for television interviews, when we go through the story and we evaluate what is it that we want to say about this particular product, we start with the product right on the table and a whiteboard.
Okay.
You know, and the slides turn out to be one idea per slide. So we'll kind of write an idea. You know, kind of sketch out a little box, put an idea in there, sketch out another box, put an idea, one idea per slide.
Okay.
Then we decide how are we going to interpret this visually.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Well, we've got a thing I'm gonna be introducing in the club called the Idea Marathon.
Great.
Which we won't go into now, but it basically is writing your ideas down on a daily basis by hand and with sketches, and then presenting them, and that's where you start. So that's great.
Yep.
So, and then what would the second thing be then? First is don't start with the slides, but start with visualizing.
The first thing is do not start by opening the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Begin to sketch, idea, brainstorm. The second point, in order to turn your presentation into a real theatrical event, is what we just talked about. Turn those ideas into visuals. So create visual slides. You can use my book, and then you can certainly use Gar Reynolds' book to help you create more visual slides.
Right.
The third point is create what I call a holy smokes moment.
Okay.
That one moment in a presentation when everybody gets it. And guess what, Will? More often than not, that goes beyond the slides. It's not about the slides.
I'm sure, yeah. Well, that is of course, the Eureka moment that we're all looking for.
Yeah.
And I suspect that when you're in the process of thinking this way and preparing this way, you will be more likely to have such moments. And the more you have, the more Well, just by sheer enthusiasm, you want to share them. I mean, Archimedes ran down the street naked. He was so excited about his idea. Well, we're not going to do that, but we
No.
definitely but we definitely want to generate the enthusiasm and the inspiration.
Well, can I give you an example of
Please.
a holy smokes moment using an iPad?
Oh, absolutely.
I was working with an executive for a major energy company. I won't mention the company because I'm not sure how public they want me to be, but it's one of the top 10 or top 15 largest companies in the world.
Okay.
So, top executive who goes around the world giving major presentations to heads of state.
Yes.
So we were working on a big presentation of his, and I came up with that concept, and I introduced it to him. I said, can we go beyond these slides? What can we really do to show off the fact that we're technologically advanced, but that we get it emotionally? How can we blend technology and emotion? And so this particular executive came up with the idea. He said, well, Carmine, we wanted to show a video. We're going to show him a video of certain explorations that we're doing in his country and how it's going. So we're going to show him a nice video clip. That's only about 2 minutes. And then we decided, why not show it to him on an iPad?
Oh.
Not on the screen, not on the not on the slides, but show it to him on an iPad. And so they actually gave him an iPad as a gift, right? And here's the gift.
That's the holy smokes moment in it as
yeah.
well. Yes.
So the gift with the video on it, and they showed me a photograph of him when he was done. This particular head of state, they had him shaking hands with the technology executives.